Hello everybody, it is the me, GamePenguin21, and today... Alright, so I know that people have probably already been talking about this for the past few days, but I wanted to throw my own personal opinion in on this because everyone's been talking about the article, but I wanted to talk about the Twitter salt pile that seems to have piled up over the last few days. Now, most of these are going to be coming from, again, most of the retweets of things, but what are we talking about today? Well, Concord's developers, Firewalk Studios, have officially been shuttered, I guess is the best way to put it. Their studio has been officially closed by Sony, and there have been a number of opinions and forums and different kinds of people around it. Now, the main few that I've seen that are going to be the generalized ways of this doing is one, they shouldn't have sold out to Sony, despite the fact that they wouldn't have had the money or the time to even make the game and put it out the door in the first place. And I honestly don't think that that studio was really well tested or well vetted, at least in terms of skill to actually making it, despite the fact that a lot of those were ex-Bungie employees, according to some sources, but that's neither here nor there. The second one being that it's actually good, and, this is the woke or go broke kind of people that are basically talking about this. I don't have any opinion on that. It wasn't a good game. It was a pretty okay 5 out of 10 or even a 6 out of 10 game, if I'm being very generous there. But overall, even if they decided to go free to play, which a lot of people in the third camp thought was going to happen, they were even with the beta numbers, they only were able to hit about 2,000 peak concurrent players. And I still think that if they did do that, they would have maybe made like 100,000 people doing it. And even still, the amount of investment and money and time that was put into this game all was basically wasted anyway because of the fact that, well, even if they started to make it free to play and put the monetization back in a different way, then they could be sued and some other stuff like that. There's a lot of moving parts to this. But overall, the overall Firewalk Studios have been completely shutted in by Sony. And yeah, so there's a lot of people talking about this, and let's actually get into the video proper. But if you like what it is that I do and want to support me in any other way, shape, or form other than a like and subscribe, which is always enough, links down to everything in the description below. But let's get started. Starting, of course, off with Grimmy Rax here, or like some sort of weird emoji chain or whatever, saying, I feel this is a mistake. Sony bought Firewalk Studios because they're comprised of primarily ex-Bungie talent, but also ex-Activision, ex-Respawn, etc. developers. The experience is there. Concord sucked, however, the studio should be internalized and allowed to make something else. Now, I'm not sure as to how much of that is actually true. The ex-Bungie employees are the people that I've been seeing here. Ex-Activision and Respawn devs, most of that seems to be maybe true, maybe not true, though Firewalk Studios in and of itself seems to, again, having that sort of thing that we've had talk about before. Again, this comes back to the one thing that I talked about in a previous video on Concord, which was the toxic positivity, where you couldn't say anything negative about the game. And again, Sony had so much faith in it that they completely and utterly shelved and canceled several other multiplayer type products to be able to make this game because they had so much faith that this was the thing that they needed. Despite the fact that, again, speaking as someone with experience, the other stuff had more market pull, but, whatever the heck happened there. Overall, I'm not sure if Firewalk Studio in and of itself had the talent to do it, and again, I don't know of their specific roles within the X companies that they were apparently a part of, but overall, if they didn't create a good game, then yeah, they didn't do their job properly, and that kind of sucks because that's, the way that it kind of happens here. Next up here, we have Moon Hunt with funny how Sony still wants to double down on live service games while not giving Concord a chance to breathe. See, I think the thing is that they did actually give Concord a little bit of a chance to breathe, or at least they gave it some semblance of an idea of how it worked, but then realized that the overall reception and the ideas were so out of date and out of fashion at the time that they released it that unfortunately, even if they wanted to rework the entirety of the thing to be more free-to-play model, it would be more money sunk into this game that they just couldn't get at that point, or they didn't have, because of reasons. And yeah, certainly, it sucks that people lost their job, and I'm not downplaying that at all, but they did give Concord a chance to breathe, at least with the free-to-play beta, and that only managed to hit around 2,000 numbers. I still also think that it was a marketing problem as well, where the entirety of Concord's marketing wasn't as prevalent or even as, widespread as it was in previous like first party type games. Like, they didn't hype this thing up for years. They didn't make it like, hey, we have this game in the works. No, they dropped a trailer, and the trailer was poorly received and no one liked it. And overall, it just kind of makes very little interesting sense here. But of course, Riggs here comes in with a screenshot from that person you like to hate. Mr. Blue Urkel himself comes in saying, Concord sold across platforms 90K to 1 million. We already know where the players are. And yet, the game still failed because it had around 900K to 1 million, apparently, which I don't even think it hit that number. It might have been pre-order numbers that he was referring to, but pre-order numbers don't necessarily mean that they sold that many. And again, most of the people didn't seem to be on it, and the game died shortly after. Next up here, we have Tyria has been reborn, I guess, with Sony bought this company just for one game, by the way. Skull emoji. Now, this would be weird if it wasn't like if it was the first time, but this is actually, I believe, the second time where they actually bought a company for one game. The other company that they bought ended up being Bungie, which only really has Destiny 2, or the Destiny franchise, I think, because I'm not sure if Destiny, I think that Destiny, they have the Destiny franchise, and that's really it, and they were also there for the multiplayer type experience, which, again, makes sense, whereas Firewalk only had the one game that was not tested or even, like, peer-reviewed in some cases, I guess. Very, very strange as to why this is. But more so than that, we still have people trying to console war over this as well, where Neurodexon over here, or Doxon, or whatever, however you pronounce it, Mr. Dex here with get ready at we play our playground. You know how this is going to end for you, talking about their upcoming game, which I find a very weird and I think apt comparison, because I don't think that this is Playground's first game. They might have actually been some support type groups within the actual Microsoft stuff, so I'm not too certain. Plus, if I remember correctly, that was being developed by Bethesda, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I don't remember the specific history off the top of my head right now. But no, I don't think this other game is going to be a failure, because it actually looks kind of decent and like a complete experience. Plus, this is a single-player game, not a multiplayer game, so once they release this game, the game itself is not going to be shuttered because it's a single-player experience. And the game wasn't pulled off of store shelves and probably won't be pulled off of store shelves and is not reliant on the internet. So, no. I don't think it's going to be the same thing for Playground games here. Next up here, we have Italics with F you Sony, stupid effing pricks, talking about how someone named Salty Armpits, I guess, says that hundreds of devs have lost their jobs because of this, and 10 morons at the top making bad decisions led this to they're going to be keeping that. I also saw this as a lot of things where they were shifting the blame from the developers to PlayStation. Now, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, that's like that person is like at a fault there, because I do definitely think that the 10 people at the top of like the whole chains and stuff did make poor decisions, mainly in the thing of canceling some of the other games that they were producing for whatever reason. The games that, had more market appeal, had a long history that was surrounding them, had already established fan bases who were begging and pleading for games, hence why Bloodborne's been still in the news and circulating around quite recently. But it does make some weird semblance of no sense why a lot of these people, this studio did get the axe, which, again, it makes some sense, but also doesn't make sense. I mean, at the same time, it's like, maybe they could hire some of those people into their other development teams. Maybe they won't. Who knows at this point, but it sucks that happens, and I'm not making that a bad thing here. Same thing here with the Happy Dinosaur talking about how Firewalk lets resurrect Concord, where Sony executives are like, no, shelve the project, which again, they signed the check, so that makes more sense. And again, while I do think that resurrecting Concord could have worked, overall, I don't think it would have worked in the end of the world because of how this whole thing kind of functions. But next up here, we have Why Hunter with you can't the studio be bought off like Krafton did. I mean, they'll do a better job at leadership than what Sony did. And I'm not sure what they mean by this, where they can be bought off as in like someone else buys the studio, because I don't think anyone else would want to buy a studio with a failed game as big of a failure as Concord, which again did not survive 2 weeks, mind you, didn't survive 2 weeks and was pulled off of store shelves, and the entire game was shelved in just like under 2 weeks. So why would they want to sell off the studio? And again, they already invested so much time and effort and money into this because they said, hey, this game is going to be really good. They put all of their eggs into this one basket, and unfortunately, none of them were good eggs. They were all really bad. But I also saw other people talking about how farewell Firewalk Studios, the world just wasn't ready for you, with the good old FPF to respects here, which I'm a little bit bummed about seeing game studios get shuttered just like any other person. But Firewalk Studios, again, let me remind you, was also the studio that had their community managers basically say, hey, all of these losers don't know how to get a good game across the finish line. And yet, the game that they presented did not last 2 weeks. And overall, the quote-unquote talentless freaks are currently dancing on the grave of that. Again, if I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. Don't insult your customers, which is why I will never insult you guys unless I'm playfully jabbing at you, because I love you guys. You guys make my job so much fun. Next up here, we have Slunk. I don't know how to pronounce that. It is absolutely insane to me how the moronic idiots at the top keep their jobs despite being the ones who forced this studio to work on this pile of dog shit of a game. By the way, some of the devs didn't even want to work on. Now, while I don't doubt that some of those devs did not want to work on this game, I'm not sure if that was necessarily Sony's fault. Again, I bring it back to the whole I forget who brought this up, but the whole toxic positivity thing, where they couldn't actually make some of the changes or the efforts or the things that they wanted to make or the criticisms that they had with the game without people dogpiling and saying that that's a stupid thing to say. And, again, that whole toxic positivity mindset was just kind of strange. And I don't know if that was a thing, but it sounds like from some of the people who were, quote unquote, representing the company or representing the community managers specifically, they seemed to be a little bit insane, just a teeny tiny bit. But that's, again, from an outsider's perspective. We're not sure specifically who wanted to work on this, who didn't want to work on this. I know there was some of the places where they were like, oh, we don't want to work on this game and stuff. So, again, maybe not everyone was happy with their jobs. We will probably never know. Next up here, we have Firespark 81 with, are we surprised a big company forces small dev company to make a game that no one wants, then shuts them down because they don't sell? Welcome to the modern gaming industry. Again, I don't think that it's that. I think that it's just that Firewalk Studios kind of convinced Sony to give them all of the money for some reason. I again, am not too certain as to why. Maybe Sony wanted to make this right or do this right or whatever. I don't think, again, that it was just Sony that made this bad decision. I definitely think that Firewalk Studios in and of itself oversold how good Concord would be at the end of the day. And I also think that Sony at this point was very desperate for a new original IP that they could farm for a lot of money. And when that didn't happen, well, they then shut the doors. Again, that is more of a tinfoil hat speculation, so who the heck cares? Next up here, we have Hellspawn with, imagine making a game that took 8 years development only to flop so hard to the point where it shuts down your studio. That happened to the people who made Forspoken as well, by the way. I think it was either this year or last year. Whenever Forspoken came out, they made the one game of Forspoken. The Forspoken devs then were like, hey, we're going to release the DLC. and then the studio shut down. Oops. So, yeah, that sucks. And the studio itself didn't necessarily get shut down. They got absorbed back into it, but that's essentially shutting down that branch of the studio. So, yeah. And next up here, we have Joe Cash with reminder that just because you didn't like the game doesn't mean we should celebrate awful things happening to people trying to make the best game they could. Fuck, man. I agree with that. Again, just because this game failed, just because this game, I'm making fun of this and all the people's opinions about this doesn't mean that I don't like Concord. I didn't like it enough to buy it because, again, it was $40. I didn't have the money at the time, nor did it look very interesting to me because I already have a better alternative to that, which, again, is the finals for me, but it's your different comfort game for everyone else. So it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Whatever your comfort game is, go forth and play it. Mine is just the finals because I have been grinding the shit out of it. I recently also completed one of the most annoying challenges, which was to stop like 10 cash outs and stuff. But overall, Concord wasn't appealing to people for various reasons, especially with the character design as well. So that's more or less a thing there. Whether you call it woke, whether you don't call it woke, whatever the case may be, this is a bad situation, and the people that were involved in this and the people that lost their jobs, I do hope that they find a better career going forward. Much like how artist here says, stop saying it was woke. Well, if this wokeness prevents you from connecting it with your primary target demographic, then yes, you did contribute to its failure. I do believe that there is some truth to that. I think that this is a little harsh, at least for my personal taste here. But again, that's one of the biggest things that I've always talked about whenever people talk about wokeness and DEI and all this other stuff. I don't think it's necessarily the wokeness that's the problem. The wokeness in and of itself doesn't necessarily contemplate a big problem, or at least it's not of as big a problem as everyone makes it out to be. I think at the end of the day, the changes that are being made don't accommodate for the majority of the audiences that these games were originally built for, or that the establishment or that the people that are the majority of your consumer buying base, the quote-unquote casuals, don't actually appeal to or really want in their video games. They want some sort of connection, some sort of deep philosophical thing, and everyone wants different stuff. Again, this is coming from someone who does marketing stuff. So again, I don't necessarily think that it's wokeness killing the gaming industry in and of itself. I think that it's because there is an overcorrection of trying to appeal to as many people as possible. Again, to steal a line from The Incredibles that I've stolen a number of times here, when everyone's represented, really no one is. And that is both true and not true, and in the both positive and negative sense. When everyone's represented as equally as possible, then unfortunately there's no conflict really in the end of the day, and it's very hard to kind of make conflict from nothing. But if you kind of have some sort of interesting representation or throw representation onto other things, it comes down to, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily woke that's killing the gaming industry, at least not from what I can see. And finally, to round this off with Spooky Mirror saying, I think Concord would have been a success if they made it free and have its original flair instead of the generic design we got. And I do agree with that. I think that if Concord was given an original idea and wasn't decided immediately to be this entire interconnected universe and was just focused to make the one game that started the whole thing off to do a domino effect, then it would have been fine. And the free-to-play model might have at least saved it because, well, they might not have gotten some money up front. They could have, in the long term, had at least some sort of support for people to go forward with it. But again, it comes down to, I think the failure of Concord comes down to three factors, at least for me, in this whole wrap-up situation. Number one is that the Concord money situation to pay up front for it did necessarily kneecap some sales, not because of the whole, oh, well, it should make it a free-to-play thing because of their competitors. That's not necessarily true. Call of Duty has free-to-play competitors, but it still sells gangbusters. You just need to do that. The second reason for it would definitely have been the art style and the design of the actual characters and the aesthetics of the game. It looked too all over the place and messy in some cases, and this is again coming from a graphic designer, so a little bit more bravado, I guess, to talk about that. And the third one, definitely a marketing failure as well as a generic design failure. So both of those kind of go hand in hand, where the marketing failed because the marketing didn't lead people to want to get the idea of the game in and of itself, and it didn't represent the full game at all. I mean, again, if they just wanted to make an animated movie series, they should have just made the animated series and not try to do both, which is what Remedy have tried and failed to do at least a number of times. But apparently, because Alan Wake made all the money that one time, Remedy just gets a free pass, I guess. I think they did it with Quantum Break or something like that. Whatever. In any case, this exploded into a massive long video. Apparently I have a lot more to say on this than anything else, but to be very clear, this is going to be just a Saturday video. Part 2 of cleaning up of the old tweets will be coming out Tuesday. If not, it's going to be Saturday and then be in this, but I want to get this one out quicker, so whenever the part 2 comes out, that'll be next, and then I might look to see if there are other things in there. Overall, I do want to thank you so much for watching this episode of me ranting into a microphone, talking about a now completely dead and shuttered studio, which is unfortunate, so praise be out to the people who lost their jobs. If you like what it is that I do, and support me in any way, shape, or form, other than like and subscribe, which is always enough, please do that. Hit that bell icon as well while you're down there. Links down to everything in the description below. I did release my new single that was for Halloween. Go out and listen to that. It's called the Ghosts on the Radios Be Rockin'. Link down to that in the description below. It's on the Bandcamp. All of my songs are down there as well. And with that being said, I thank you so much for watching again, and peace off.
Hey man!